America, you should be afraid. Honestly, here's the point tonight. Reverend Jeremiah Wright is Ward Churchill. And here's how I got there. If I may refresh your memory on who Ward Churchill is, he's that crazy professor who wrote that essay that compared the innocent thousands who were killed on 9/11 in the attacks to the Nazis. He called them, quote, little Eichmanns. In a past sermon, Jeremiah Wright said that 9/11 attacks were, quote, American chickens coming home to roost. Both of these ideas are shameful and absurd. The men who said them, you know what? You can say whatever you want. It's America. God bless freedom of speech, huh? But you need to be held accountable. You can say things like this, but when you start teaching or preaching it, especially to a possible president, I got a little problem with that. Maybe it's just me. I'm drawing the comparison to Ward Churchill to illustrate a simple point. Jeremiah Wright is a dangerous man, and it has nothing to do with the color of his skin or the color of his church. I'm not even talking about his church. I'm talking about him. He is possibly sitting there and talking and whispering into the ear of the next president of the United States. I want to keep Reverend Wright as a part of this election conversation for the same reasons that I railed against Ward Churchill, who I believe is a white man, even though he claims to be an Indian, for spreading his leftist opinions to his college students. You know, when people use their public platform to spread their personal message of hatred, you got to expose that person and discredit them, or let them discredit themselves. I'm sorry to say it, but there are more people like this in this country every single day, and we've got to call bullcrap when we see it. Ward Churchill painted his ultra-liberal leftist Marxist agenda as academic freedom. Well, using the same tactic now, Reverend Wright's black liberation theology is nothing more than a fancy name for Marxism, America bashing and racism against whites. Remember in a past sermon, Reverend Wright said this.
We say that God will bless the shock and awe as we take over unilaterally another country, calling it a coalition because we got three guys from Australia going against the United Nations, going against the majority of Christians, Muslims, and Jews throughout the world, making a preemptive strike in the name of God. We cannot see how what we are doing is the same thing Al-Qaeda is doing under a different color flag, calling on the name of a different God to sanction and approve our murder and our mayhem.
Would you be sitting in that church for 20 years? My goodness. Last night, Reverend Wright spoke to the NAACP in Detroit. He told them, he was their keynote speaker, that he is descriptive, not divisive, when he speaks about racial injustices. Well, then why would you refer to America again in a church sermon as, quote, the U.S. of KKKA? Why would he attack prominent black Republicans, calling them sellouts that, quote, live below sea level? They live below the level of Clarence Colin and condemnednesia. These are divisive statements. That's exactly what Reverend Jeremiah Wright wants to do, divide black Americans against white Americans, or black Americans who aren't black enough, I guess. You don't need to read between the lines. I don't need to listen to your whole speech to hear the hatred, Reverend. So tonight, here's what you need to know, America. Bullies like Reverend Wright and Churchill are their own worst enemies. Ward Churchill's words said everything we needed to know about him. It didn't take a rocket scientist to figure it out. And since, he's been found guilty of academic misconduct and fired. So now that Reverend Wright continues to make his appearances and let his words speak for themselves, you do have to wonder, just how much is Barack listening now? And what if Obama is elected president? What does that mean? What then? Richard Thompson Ford is a law professor at Stanford University, author of The Race Card, How Bluffing About Bias Makes Race Relations Worse, and Jim Garrity writes The Campaign Spot. It's a blog for the National Review Online. Jim, let me start with you. Is it fair? I mean, Barack Obama says he's his spiritual advisor. Jeremiah Wright says he's the guy who brought him to Jesus, baptized him. They've been friends for 20 years. Can you learn anything about Barack Obama by listening to Jeremiah Wright?
I think so, and I think what's interesting is when the first Wright videos came to light, I think a lot of Americans said this wasn't a deal breaker, but they really wanted to know how you could get such a pleasant-sounding, moderate-sounding, seemingly normal person like Barack Obama could be the student of a radical and such a divisive figure like Jeremiah Wright. In response to this, Obama gives this very eloquent speech on race relations that never quite addresses how he ended up, what he learned from him and what he heard, what he thought of it, what it would have taken to get him to leave that church, where Obama's, red line was. And so now we see this, and we see that, wow, nothing has changed for Jeremiah Wright. He doesn't feel rebuked by this, and in fact, he kind of suggested that Obama didn't really mean it when he disavowed those words.
He didn't suggest it. I said he said it. He says what he has to say. He's a politician. We have some amazing clips from his appearance today at the National Press Club. We're going to play here in a little while in the program. But Richard, let me go to you. I want to play something that Jeremiah Wright said today at the Press Club about attacking the black church. Here it is.
Why are you speaking out now?
On November the 5th and on January 21st, I'll still be a pastor. As I said, this is not an attack on Jeremiah Wright. It has nothing to do with Senator Obama. It is an attack on the black church launched by people who know nothing about the African-American religious tradition. And why am I speaking out now? In our community, we have something called playing the dozens. If you think I'm going to let you talk about my mama and her religious tradition and my daddy and his religious tradition and my grandma, you got another thing coming.
Richard, I have to tell you, I'm not speaking out about the black church. I am speaking about black liberation theology, which is clearly Marxism. How do you read this?
Well, I wonder whether the Reverend Wright has decided to work for the Clinton campaign. This has got to be very bad news for Barack Obama. I think it's not true that the things that Jeremiah Wright has said are representative of the views of most African Americans or most black churches. Liberation theology is a minority part of the black church community. It's a significant minority, but a minority. In most black churches, you certainly do not hear things like that.
I have to tell you, Richard, it's not the majority view. I think it's right up there with 9/11 conspiracies. Here he is. He's saying the government made AIDS. We're the same as Al-Qaeda. We are terrorists, and basically we started it. That is clearly not. But here's what's frightening about it is, here's a religious extremist that the media is giving a pass to and the left is giving a pass to. I don't understand how you cannot see that this is the same kind of dangerous stuff that is happening in the Middle East. You're mixing politics with religion, and you're putting them together as one.
Well, I agree that the mix of religion and politics is volatile, and that the things that Reverend Wright has said are quite divisive and destructive. I think it's, particularly some of these conspiracy theories, which have obviously no basis in fact. I do think that there are real racial injustices that plague our inner cities, and that we need to talk about those, and we need to talk about constructive solutions. And the things that Reverend Wright is saying are leading us in the wrong direction.
I have to tell you, I love the premise of your book, because I've been saying it for years now with political correctness. What are you doing? You cry racism when there is no racism. It hurts it down the road. Jim, let me play another piece from the speech today, and I want you to listen and watch for his arrogance here. This guy is so unbelievably arrogant. Watch this.
Some critics have said that your sermons are unpatriotic. How do you feel about America and about being an American?
I served 6 years in the military. Does that make me patriotic? How many years did Cheney serve?
Watch this. Now watch him stand behind her. The guy, he's not humble at all. There is an elitism. There is a cockiness that goes right into Obama as well.
I would note, Glenn, that Timothy McVeigh served in the military too, and I think it's okay to question his patriotism. The thing that kind of really stood out to me, not about this speech today, but about his speech to the NAACP yesterday in Detroit, was that he argued that black brains and white brains are wired differently, that black children have a different way of learning. He said this in front of the NAACP, and near as I could tell, there was no objection to this. In other words, now the racially unifying position is that biologically the brains are different and that they learn differently. I keep waiting for Rod Serling to come out smoking a cigarette and explain that we're in the twilight zone.
I have to tell you, I don't remember which one. Was it Richard? Was it you that said you thought that, the Clintons are behind this, or, it must be working for Clinton? I don't think so. I think that this is so Clintonian that Obama is really adopting it. I think get it out now. The media is excusing it. And by the time it comes around November, people say, oh, that's just old news. Is there a chance?
I don't know about that. Well, I think that this is bad news for Obama. I really think that if the best thing that could happen for the Obama campaign would be for Reverend Wright to take a long vacation. Every time he opens his mouth, it's bad. And, I don't think it's fair to attribute all of Wright's views to Obama, but it does, it is going to make people concerned, and it keeps
Richard, let me ask you
front and center.
Would you be 20 years and call this man your spiritual advisor? Would you be 20 years in that church with him?
Well, no, I don't think so. I do think that my senses of Barack Obama went to Reverend Wright when he was trying to get a connection to a community in the south side of Chicago, and that was...
Watch his wife. I think his wife says it all. You watch her. She believes it, I think, more than he does. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.